Welcome. You're listening to The Aligned Self, Conversations in Creating a Conscious and Abundant Life. This is Daniel Denovi. I'll be your guide and host. Let's see just where we can take this. Hello, friend, and welcome back to the conversation. Now, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, and if you're new, this might be news to you. Not only am I a coach and a teacher, but I also consider myself a philosopher. So while many of the ideas that I share with you are grounded in science, grounded in psychological principles, there's also a certain element of philosophy, a personal point of view. And so in this episode, I'm taking great pleasure that one of our listeners has asked me a question of which I can philosophize about on the podcast. And in the same token, in the same vein, answer his question, or at least present a point of view. Now, as I consider this question, I want you to understand that it has applications on multiple dimensions of reality, multiple dimensions of self. So, this question comes from a relatively young listener. He's in his mid-20s and relatively young to me. But no matter what his age, he is a musician, and he's going through a period of reflection in which virtually every artist goes through at some point. And his reflection point and the question that he offered up to me is, what is the value of art? So let me read you what he wrote. After reading and exploring money and the energetics of money, I learned that money is, in a way, value. And so I know why I create. And I like to create music, but when I think about what value music or the arts add to this life, it feels like a temporary high that doesn't really add up to much more value than eating a burger, something that felt good for as long as it was there. In a way, feeling like I can create something that boosts someone's energy temporarily, and then they may use it as a way of getting that temporary boost, may do even more harm than good. And so it doesn't feel really valuable to me from that perspective. Looking forward to your viewpoint. Now, I understand that this is a query that virtually every person goes through. Who am I in relationship to what I do and how I'm being in the world? Am I, in the grand scheme of things, actually making a difference? And in the context of his question, is what I'm doing really have value? Now, we need to preface this that as a creator, he has a certain listenership on Spotify and other platforms, and he's making an income from other people, possibly just getting a temporary high off what he's created. And so again, with the question, what is the value of art? Now, there's intrinsic value and there's extrinsic value, meaning the intrinsic value is what comes from within. It has value just because it's there. And it also has value because it is a creation. It is the result of a creative act, sometimes making something from nothing. Now, one of the greatest quotes I've ever heard about art, I cannot attribute to anybody, but I do remember the thrust of it. And that is that the role of the artist is not to reproduce life in an exacting fashion, almost like taking a photograph, but to actually reinterpret the world, to offer up a new perspective, to expand another person's awareness, actually changing their reality. So from an intrinsic point of view, how does the music move the listener? How does it affect their spirit? How does it affect their soul? A piece of art, how does it affect the viewer? Does it offer them a new perspective on life? Does it move them emotionally? And then from an extrinsic point of view, how does it affect society? How does it affect culture? What conversations does it create for mankind in general? And then, what is the perceived value of that offering? Now, the value of anything is perception. And so while as a creator, you may place a certain value on creating a work of art, but it's ultimately up to the marketplace to assign a value to it or to judge whether or not it is of any value, and they do that through their power of purchasing. Now, for a minute, let's just talk about music. There are artists that have a very formulaic approach in producing music. meaning that they use melodies and music and lyrics that they know will have an appeal to the masses. And that music is typically what you hear on the pop stations. It's popular for a while. The sound is reminiscent of a period in time, and you can actually hear it. Songs from the 80s, songs from the 90s, songs from the 50s. There's a particular formula or recipe in all the songs from a particular era. And you could almost point to the song and identify the era in which it was listened to or created. And then there's other songs that are timeless, that seem to transcend any period whatsoever. I have a memory of driving down the road in the 90s. I don't remember the exact year. I remember that I had a particular hard day at work. I was driving home. I wasn't in a particular rush. I was just kind of in a chill mood, and I had classical music on. And as I was listening, my mind was just kind of drifting as my other than conscious mind was driving down the road. And there was a long pause between songs. And then the DJ came on, the PBS DJ, announced that what was coming up was a presentation by the Detroit Philharmonic and their rendition of the William Tell Overture. Now, the William Tell Overture is the theme song to The Lone Ranger. But up until this moment, I had never heard the song in its entirety. And in listening to that song at that moment, it transformed my experience of life. It is a memory etched in my mind. I turned up the volume on the speakers. I had the surround sound. It was vibrating in my body. It transformed how I was feeling. Whatever happened that day, I completely forgot about it. It was so invigorating. The only way I can explain it, it was an experience. You might ask, what kind of value does that have? Well, that was 30 years ago. And I still have that memory. And in the end, when we got one foot in the grave, all we have are our memories, our experiences. We don't have the money. We don't even remember the money we spent. But we remember those moments that took our breath away. In 1976, I went to my first concert. I paid $16 for a ticket to see Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. He had just released the song Kathmandu. And the warm-up band was Manfred Mann, and they sang the song Blinded by the Light. That concert is etched in my memory. Even my friend Alan throwing up next to me at the concert, for reasons unknown, that too is part of the entire experience. Was it worth the $16? You betcha. And then in 1986, in the Capitol Theater in Columbus, Ohio, I was sitting in the third row listening to Chuck Mangione and his band. Again, a memorable experience. So music has been part of the hallmark experiences of my life. When I was in my late teens, I began listening to a band called Earth, Wind & Fire, lead singer Maurice White. They were a unique blend of funk and disco beats, Brazilian rhymes, and was introduced to the kalimba. And then you could never forget the Phoenix horns, which are part of the music. Other bands did not have a horn section in popular music at that time, and so their sound was very unique. Their lyrics, their phrasings are part of my thinking. They're a part of my constitution. The melodies are part of me from day to day. Sometimes I just hear the melodies in the background of my mind, and I hear the song playing. It's the theme song to my life for the most part. And then we can talk about the feelings, how they were anchored by that music. I can hear a particular song, and I can remember what was going on in my life when I first heard it, when I first began listening to it. Those experiences around music, for me, are priceless. I could not, if I tried, put a value on it. Yet over the years, what I've found interesting, especially in different school districts that are going through economic hard times, when they're taking an assessment of, what curriculum should we teach, oftentimes when it comes down to economic terms, the first things to go are the humanities, the arts, music, choir, art. Yet it is those disciplines that actually speak to the human condition. They evoke emotion from us. Now, I know guys that can get really excited, and girls, women, that can get really excited about a math problem. But nothing moves the human spirit so predictably as art. Even though at times it's just entertainment, it allows us to slip away, to create a departure point between the mundane and the ordinary. It's those moments that inspire us, that spur us on, just like I had that hard day at work and I was fatigued. But when I listened to the William Tell Overture, I was moved to tears. My entire body vibrated, tingled all over, goosebumps. The other day I posted this on my Facebook feed, and it comes from Vaughn Fleischfresher. It's his quote: "People never forget being in a band. People never forget being in a choir. People never forget being in an orchestra. You never forget the music, the friendships, the feelings, the concerts, the laughter, emotion, or the sense of belonging. There's nothing like making music with other people." When I was 18, I traveled Europe as part of a collegiate wind band, a concert band. We played concerts all over Europe. And you may not understand this fully unless you're a musician. But there are times when the melodies come together, when the energy's there, where it is almost orgasmic. It's uplifting. You transcend the current moment because of this moment you're creating with music. But I've also had those experiences with art, in painting, and especially in sports, athletics. There are moments that just come together that are beyond the ordinary. And so it could be said that these moments, these creative moments, touch us in the most spiritual, fundamental way. It immerses us in the moment. I have been the experiencer of countless sunrises and sunsets. Now, one of the things that I'm most present to is when there's this kaleidoscope of color moving through the sky that changes from moment to moment. There's the realization that in this moment right now, the sunset that I'm observing is going to be different than the one after that, and the moment after that. Each and every moment with that sunset is unique and never to be repeated in exactly that way. But that is me having this experience from a particular perspective. The perspective or the context is decisive, meaning that it gives meaning to life. And so ultimately, who gets to say, does art have value? Well, it is the creator and the experiencer. From the perspective of the creator, creating is life-giving. Energetically, it occurs in the second chakra, the creative center of the spirit. But as an experiencer, it can occur on every level energetically. So as a creator, you get to say, it's in your declaration, does it have value? What kind of value are you bringing to it? What kind of value are you delivering or expressing through the medium? What about the lyrics? What about the music, the harmony? That is a creative act. And it's your attitude on what you're delivering to it that gives it meaning, that gives it value. Again, value is perception. If you're concerned about the value in the marketplace, well, then you let the marketplace determine what the value is. Today, a Van Gogh painting can go for a couple $1,000,000 with no problem. But during Van Gogh's lifetime, he only sold one painting. He was very prolific, hundreds of paintings, yet he only sold one. And get this, he sold it to his brother. Let's say that his brother bought it so that Van Gogh could eat. Van Gogh's brother was his biggest fan. He kept a roof over his head. He kept him busy, just so his brother Vincent could paint, to do what he did best. But Vincent was not concerned with how the marketplace received him. He was just concerned with being the best painter that he could be. Michelangelo, considered one of the greatest sculptors, painters of all time, said of the masses, if they knew how much work went into it, they would never call it genius. Does art have value? To me, it provides the sensuality of life. It appeases the senses. It moves the spirit. It is the nuance. It is the fragrance in the air. It is the texture and the vibrance in the moment. So as a creator, you need to ask, who are you creating for? Why are you creating? What's your big why? Who are you creating for? Are you creating because you cannot keep it within you? Or are you looking for the applause? Are you looking for the impact on other people? It's okay to have both. It's okay just to have one or the other. But realize that it's going to be a little bit empty if your only enjoyment from it is how it's received by other people. I can remember in the 90s, it was 1990 in fact, I was in Allentown, Pennsylvania at the Art Museum, and there was a symposium, a panel of different artists. There was a painter, a sculptor, and a photographer, very renowned artists for their genre. And the focus of the symposium is how do we get paid for what we do? How do we create our value in the marketplace? Their basic position was that the marketplace, the general population, did not understand the value of their art. And they were dismayed and disgruntled over the fact that they could not actually make a living doing what they were doing. They had to supplement their income with other streams or other channels that were more economically viable. They didn't understand why people were buying and spending money on these prints, these reproductions of other art, and not buying theirs. Why couldn't they sell their art? And from where I was sitting in the audience, it was very clear to me that they were crying because they weren't being accepted by everybody. They were doing it for the wrong reasons. They were seeking outside validation. And these were acclaimed artists that were reviewed by their peers, by different museums, and they were crying because they did not have mass appeal. Well, remember Van Gogh. He did it for the art. He did it because he could not do it. It was a natural expression of who he was and how he was being in the world. It was when I had the realization that I would teach, I would coach, whether or not I got paid for it at all. Because for me, I was in it for the transformation, my own transformation and the transformation of the person I was working with. And I knew that I was going to do this whether I got paid for it or not. I knew I was in the right place, that it was the vocation for me, because I could not do it. A writer must write. An artist must paint. A musician must create music. It is part of who they are. It is how they want to be in the world. They feel most expressed. They feel the most joyous, and so does that have value? That's the intrinsic value. Nobody can take that away from you. And so, does art have value? From my perspective, absolutely. Does everybody feel that way? Probably not. One man's meat is another man's poison. One man's treasure is another man's junk. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And as a creator, you give up how it's ultimately used, how it's ultimately viewed, because each person is going to have their own experience of that. The only thing that you can do is show up and do good work. Be better today than you were yesterday. Seek to be better tomorrow than you were today. Compare yourself against no one else, because like that sunset, you are unique and incomparable to anybody else on the planet, because you are uniquely gifted to be you. So until next time, this is your friend and host, Daniel Danovi, urging you to follow your bliss. Live your life from inner signals. Be inner directed as you engage in the epic adventure. It always comes around to being inner directed, doesn't it? Funny how that works.